Okay, so this is a PowerPoint about anaerobic respiration, and on your spec that is 7.7 under topic 7. We've done aerobic, so we've looked at glycolysis, then we did Krebs, then we did link, and then lastly we did oxidative phosphorylation or the electron transport chain. So now we're coming on to the last bit of this topic, and that is anaerobic respiration. Okay, so learning objectives today are to be able to explain how energy is released by respiration without oxygen and to describe how lactate is produced by anaerobic respiration. So that's what we're looking at today. Now, the important thing to remember about anaerobic respiration is that it is only the process of glycolysis. So there's no oxygen involved because it's anaerobic. It's occurring in the cytoplasm, not in the mitochondria. Remember, glycolysis is the first stage. It's where we take our 6-carbon glucose molecule that's too big, and then we're going to split it into 2 3-carbon pyruvates. So that's glycolysis. And it occurs totally in the cytoplasm. The net gain from glycolysis is 2 ATP. Remember, you're putting energy in to get energy out. So at the start of glycolysis, you put in 2 ATP, and then you form 4 at the end, so your net gain is going to be 2. Okay, so you don't get a lot of energy from aerobic respiration. And as I said, it occurs totally in the cytoplasm. Okay, so a couple of questions for you. I want to know from you, why is oxygen important, and what happens in the absence of oxygen? Remember, I want an A2 type answer here. So pause, answer those questions, and then come back. Okay, so why is oxygen important? And I'm going to apologise, my animation's gone a bit wrong here, but we're going to answer question 2 first. What happens in the absence of oxygen? Well, if there's no oxygen, Krebs cycle can't take place, the electron transport chain won't occur, and you start to get your pyruvate building up in the cell, because without oxygen, there's no final electron acceptor. So as we looked at that question in the last lesson, the electrons will begin to back up basically along the electron transport chain, reduce NAD and reduce FAD, can't release the hydrogen ions that they're carrying, and the whole system will grind to a halt basically. So why is oxygen important? Because it's the final electron acceptor. Remember, it combines with electrons and protons to form water right at the very end of the electron transport chain. And what happens in the absence of oxygen? There's no Krebs, there's no electron transport chain, there's no link reaction. Nothing inside the mitochondria itself can take place. Okay, so your pyruvate will begin to build up. Now remember, pyruvate is going to be diffusing across that mitochondrial membrane because of concentration gradients. If that pyruvate isn't going into the link reaction, then the concentration gradient won't occur, and pyruvate will begin to accumulate in the cytoplasm. Okay. A quick reminder of glycolysis. What I would like you to do now, again, is pause the video and see what you can remember. So, glycolysis. So looking through glycolysis, you've got your 6-carbon glucose, a huge molecule. You need to break it apart into 2 3-carbons. So you need to put some energy in. This is our energy investment phase. So we're putting in 2 ATPs, and hopefully you've picked up the fact that I've lost my PI off the end there, so I apologise. You phosphorylate that glucose, you make it into an unstable compound, and it splits via hydrolysis into 2 3-carbon TPs. So there they are. And then the next stage is we are going to form, we're going to form some ATP, so that's 4 ATP made there, and we're going to make some reduced NAD there. Okay, and then we end up at the end of glycolysis with 2 3-carbon pyruvates that are going to diffuse into the mitochondrial matrix for the link reaction and Krebs and so on and so forth. But in anaerobic respiration, so in order for glycolysis to keep continuing, that pyruvate needs to be removed. You need to get rid of it. You need to get rid of it somehow, and you need to regenerate your NAD. You need to oxidize your NAD so you can keep the process of glycolysis going. Okay, and you do this by the NAD transfers its hydrogen ion to pyruvate and makes lactate basically. And that way you've got rid of the pyruvate. And you've got some NAD that you can keep. So you can keep forming reduced NAD, basically keep recycling it. Okay, so here's what happens. So we've got a normal glycolysis. So form an ATP, and we've formed our ATP there, and our reduced NAD there, and we're up to pyruvate. Now in anaerobic respiration, lactate is formed. Again, it's a 3-carbon compound in animals. It's different in plants, and we'll look at that when we look at the prac. But in animals, you form lactate, okay, and it's 3 carbons. So you're not losing any carbons. There's no CO2 involved here. And what you're doing, that reduced NAD is donating its hydrogen ion to the pyruvate and forming lactate, freeing up NAD to go back into the cycle again. There it goes, back into the cycle, so it can become reduced again. And it just keeps going round and round and round until such a time that your levels of lactic acid build up in your muscles and you feel the burn. Okay, now Hopefully, at some point in your life, you've all felt this. And if you haven't, I suggest strongly that you stick your arms out for the next 5 minutes and leave them there until it starts to hurt, and you'll know what I'm talking about. And up there's just popped your equation there. Pyruvate plus reduced NAD gives you lactate and NAD. And again, that NAD can go back into glycolysis again. You can keep forming some lactate and some ATPs. So let's look at what the effect of this lactate build up in the muscles. Well, it hurts. Okay, you get pain. What happens is the lactate forms lactic acid in the muscle tissue, and that's going to start affecting your active sites. And your enzymes begin to denature, basically, and that's not a good thing. So the pH is going to be decreased as hydrogen ions begin to accumulate, and you get the pain and fatigue. So you cannot maintain anaerobic respiration for very long, and you will be aware of that. That will have happened to you in life. You'll know about that. So what happens to that lactate? Well, when oxygen becomes available, it can go back into the Krebs cycle, carry on straight through to, through the links to Krebs, to electron transport chain, and so on. Or your liver cells can convert into glucose, so you can store it as glycogen and use it at a later time for respiration or whatever, whenever you need it. So that's two things that happen to it. Either it goes back into the Krebs cycle, or it's stored as glycogen. And I've just put the little graph on there to show you. So what we've got is you've got a before exercise here, if you look at this bit here, okay, and then we can see, so sort of a low level of oxygen uptake. Then as soon as you begin exercising, you can see you get that steady increase, and then it begins to peak, and then after exercise, it doesn't immediately fall back down. There's a gradual decline, isn't there? And it's, it takes a bit of a while for levels of oxygen uptake to decrease, and you'll be aware of that. You'll have, I don't know, run for a bus or done some exercise and be aware that you don't immediately, your breathing rate doesn't immediately snap back to normal. It takes a while for your breathing rate to return to normal, and the reason for that is your oxygen debt. The oxygen jet basically is the excess amount of oxygen that you need to remove the lactate that's built up in your muscles, and until that lactate has been removed, your breathing rate will increase, and we're going to look at why that is in I don't know, a couple of PowerPoints time. But yeah, so that's your little graph there. Okay, so another thing to do is fill the gap. So get gap filling. Hopefully you paused it and you did that, so let's go through that. So anaerobic respiration occurs mostly in muscles when oxygen is being used up quicker than it can be supplied. So an oxygen debt occurs. In the absence of oxygen, glycolysis would usually stop, as there would be a build-up of reduced NAD and also pyruvate, remember. For glycolysis to continue, reduced NAD must be converted into NAD. This happens when pyruvate takes up 2 hydrogen atoms for reduced NAD to make lactate. Lactate causes pain and fatigue, or cramp and fatigue in the muscles, so it must be removed. It can be oxidized back to pyruvate or taken to liver and converted to glycogen. Okay. So, do you recall when we were looking at the use of illegal drugs in sport? And one of the things that we looked at was creatine powder, and it's not illegal, it's not endorsed, but it's something you can use. You can buy massive great big tubs, and I said you would come back to it. This is where we're coming back to it. So your body uses basically 3 energy systems. So when you're doing intensive exercise, so that could be like lifting dead weights, it could be sprinting, it could be picking something up quick, I don't know, whatever. So short, sharp exercise. You've got 2 systems. You've got your ATP-CP system, or your phosphocreatine system, and you've got your anaerobic system. So they're both about intensive, short, sharp bursts of energy. You can't maintain them for any length of time. And then for endurance, you've got your aerobic respiration. So that's going to be like for posture, for standing up straight, for if you're running a marathon or if you're walking long distances, aerobic respiration. And we have a little graph to look at here now, quite an interesting graph, and it shows you the 3 systems. So we've got the immediate energy system in green, our short-term in purple, and our long-term in red. And we can see that the ATP-CP system is this is percentage contribution of energy here up the side. So you can see in the first sort of 10 seconds, you're using your ATPC system. That's the first thing you lose, and that will decline as the levels of the creatine phosphate sort of decrease. And then that will be taken over by your glycolysis here. We can see that increases and then plateaus, then declines again after sort of about, I don't know, a minute and a half. And then you've got your long-term, your aerobic respiration, okay, and that is the one that will take over and will be used totally, for long-term exercise. I've got a couple of examples there. It's not just in humans. Remember, you could get questions about other sorts of animals, which is why that's in there. So we've got our cheetah using sort of the ATPC anaerobic, whereas our wildebeest that's on a long migration, a long walk, will be using aerobic. So don't just assume they're going to ask you about animals. So I told you we'd come back to the ATPC, so here it is. very, very short amount of time that you would use this for. Remember, you've got creatine phosphate. That creatine phosphate can donate a phosphate to ADP to form ATP. It's stored in your muscles, and you can hydrolyze it to release the energy base. You can use it to resynthesize ATP and creatine. And remember, that's done without oxygen. That's really what we need to know about that. Okay, so what I want you to do now is I want you to use in the key terms in that box there. I want you to explain the importance of anaerobic respiration in animals, and I want you to email it to me. Okay, so I want you to put that, string that together into some words and then send it on my college email, which you all have. And if you haven't, take a photograph of it because you're going to need it in the following weeks. So pause now, write that, email that off to me. Okay. So I look forward to those emails of all the your little descriptions. And what I want to look at now is some exam questions. So I don't know if you've got these on paper based. If not, you can just do them like this. So let's look at the first one. Aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration produces ATP in cells. Fair enough. During anaerobic respiration, lactate is produced. Table below shows the lactate concentration in the blood of a person who is an athlete and in a person who is not an athlete, non-athlete, and increasing levels of exercise. So we can see here we've got our arbitrary units, so they're not measuring exercise anything particular, and so we've got increasing levels from no exercise to a lot of exercise. Blood lactate concentration there in our athlete, and we can see it's increasing, and non-athlete, again, we can see it's increasing, but we can see that 240, there's more lactate in the non-athlete than there is in the athlete. Okay. It then says, explain the change in blood lactate concentration with increasing level of exercise in the non-athlete. So why in the non-athlete is the levels of lactate going up? It doesn't say describe, so it doesn't want you to repeat back the table. It wants you to tell them why. Why the lactate levels going from 1.5 at no exercise up to 10 when you've got intensive exercise. You need to tell them why. It's a 3-mark question, so you need to say 3 interesting things. And you need to take 3 minutes on that. So pause, take 3 minutes and come up with an answer. Okay, so hopefully you took 3 minutes and came up with an answer for that one. So let's look at the answer. So, idea of insufficient oxygen supply. You're telling them that it is anaerobic respiration. You're referring to glycolysis. It's in bold. You need to have that in your answer. Okay, so we're using an anaerobic respiration system. We're carrying out glycolysis only. And you're given the idea that reduced NAD is produced, and then that pyruvate from that reduced NAD you're using that reduced NAD to convert pyruvate to lactate. Okay, and that's marking point number 5. Idea that conversion of pyruvate involves the oxidation of reduced NAD. So glycolysis is occurring. You're producing pyruvate as normal, and then because there's no oxygen available, you're now oxidizing your reduced NAD, donating that hydrogen ion to the pyruvate to form lactate, and that's why the lactate is building up in the muscle tissues. You're not describing the table, you are explaining it. And if you look at what the examiner's comment says, it says it there. Examiners ruled those who appreciated that oxygen supply becomes an issue. In order to continue ATP production, glycolysis continues and the pyruvate produces is converted to lactate. Students need to be encouraged to include the level of detail expected at this stage of their education. I'm marking your mocks. You're not doing it still. Remember, you're an A2 biologist. Put detail in. You know detail, so put it in. Many students fail to understand the command word explain and describe. Please be careful with that question. When it says explain, don't fall into the habit of describing. Right, next question. Suggest an explanation for the difference between the blood lactate concentration of the athlete and the non-athlete. Suggest. So that says come up with a reasonable answer. Suggest why. Why has the athlete got a lower blood lactate concentration than the non-athlete? Why is the non-athlete higher? What do you know about athletes as compared to a non-athlete? And you know lots of stuff about the difference between an athlete and a non-athlete. This is a 2-mark question, so give yourself 2 minutes. Pause, give yourself 2 minutes, and we'll look at the answer. Here's our answer. So, the difference between an athlete and non-athlete. Athletes train, okay? They do a lot of exercise. Their aerobic capacity is more, okay? They are more efficient. So the idea of increased oxygen supply, more aerobic respiration, less anaerobic respiration. Now, we haven't done stroke volume and cardiac output. I'm doing with them next, but it would be reasonable to suggest that you would be able to say that they've got a better blood supply, or they've got more oxygenated blood, or their heart pumps more blood, or they've got more red blood cells. You should know cardiac about stroke volume. They're year 1. So their heart's more efficient basically. And then idea of increased sort of ventilation. Don't write respiration. Remember, respiration is not breathing. Ventilation is breathing. So idea of increased ventilation. So they're breathing more. They're breathing deeper. They've got a more efficient range of gas exchange. They've got a bigger vital capacity, which if you don't know what that is, I am just talking about that in another PowerPoint coming up. Okay, so you're saying why? Why is an athlete using anaerobic respiration less than a non-athlete? Examiner's report. Okay, so the question suggests why increased lactate was increasing. I read that wrong. Why the increase in lactate with increasing exercise was lower for the athlete. Many tend to describe the trend. Again, don't do that. They want you to give reasons. There are many unnecessary references to fast and slow muscle twitch fibers. The examiners rewarded students who appreciate the athlete would have an improved ability to supply oxygen. It's through their training. Okay, so that is the end of the video on anaerobic PowerPoint on anaerobic respiration. I've now set you some other bits and pieces to crack on with, and the next one after this we'll be looking at cardiac we'll be on respirometry, and then we'll move on to cardiac output and ventilation.